All right, we are live once again. So hey everybody, welcome back to the channel today. Just like yesterday and as promised today, we are here at the Route 66 Range Expo. It's been going on all weekend, and as I did yesterday, I will tell you again today. If you've got the time and you're in the area, put us in your pocket, get in your car, and get on down to this event. It is a great opportunity to get that face time with the vendors, see some of the products that are on the market today, as well as get that community time with the firearms community. Of course, with us today, we do have Sheriff Chad Bianco. Sheriff, thank you very much for being with us today.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. But before we get into that today, guys, please, as always, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the video. YouTube doesn't always like the firearms thing, and we got our video throttled a little bit yesterday for showing a promo on this channel. But while we're here at this event, it is paramount that we're able to show you the things that are actually going on. We decided to do it again today, and it really ends up being about the community, the firearms community, being able to come together. As we'll talk a little bit about today, and as I've continuously talked about, we're looking down the barrel of these 2024 elections. We're really trying to work our networks to make sure as much of the firearms community is going to the ballot box with their Second Amendment rights as a priority. So with that, Sheriff, thanks again for being with us here.
You're welcome.
I'm curious, being that we're here at the event, obviously it's a highlight on firearms, the firearms community. It's a great opportunity for people to come together in that way. From your experience and from your perspective, what does the firearms community mean to you?
Well, I grew up in a different place. I didn't grow up in California. Luckily for me, I grew up in a state where firearms were normal. I mean, like a lot of people my age, I grew up during hunting seasons. We took guns to school, and we hunted on the way to school, and we hunted after school or after practice. You stopped on the way home, and it's either deer season, pheasant season, whatever the case may be. And on weekends, you went shooting. I mean, we went shooting with our parents. Our parents just let us go shooting with our friends as early teenagers and maybe even not teenagers. And it was just a different world where we knew that guns were not the enemy. Guns are not bad. It's people that are bad, and you treat guns with respect. You treat guns with the potential of danger that they have if you use them improperly. So my life growing up around guns was just normal. It wasn't. No one ever told me that I had a Second Amendment right. It was just normal, and certainly no one ever told me that I didn't have that right. So as I grew up and then learned that there was an actual segment of the population that was anti-gun, that was anti our right to bear arms, or it's our right to own arms, then it became more personal and more alarming or more aware. I obviously had to become more self-aware. And then moving to California was a culture shock for me. And you realize that they really don't want you having guns. And for me growing up, I was a huge fan of history. I was a huge fan of, in school, I did well in school. I can't say I got straight A's, but I was certainly, it was because of a lack of effort to get an A, not because of what I was learning. And history was big for me. And I enjoyed American history and learning where we came from and why we have the Bill of Rights and why we have those things. So then getting into law enforcement, what I'm doing now, learning that there is a huge push in not only the state really leads the country, but in the country now to disarm us and to take away our Second Amendment rights. So for me, and then the position that I'm in, it's very personal. It's very, you have the same far left that wants me to defend to the end their First Amendment rights, and then they want me to take away your Second Amendment rights. It's a bizarre time that we're in.
Yeah, which you could, the general argument is that the Second Amendment protects all of your other constitutional rights. So that seems like a little bit of a discrepancy in opinion there. But speaking from a law enforcement's background, there's a certain, I would say, demonization that you see from the mainstream media on firearms, and really by proxy, then the firearms community. From a law enforcement perspective, and I mean you're the sheriff, that means you lead the department. What is the interaction with the firearms community that you see there? Because me personally, not just dealing with the sheriff's department, also dealing with a lot of police departments, there seems to be personally a lot of respect there that you don't necessarily see on the mainstream media. So, I mean, can you speak to that at all? What's the law enforcement perspective on the firearms community?
Yeah, that's an outstanding question for this perspective, because the media and the government want you to believe that and I'm law enforcement, I'm the sheriff's department, I'm a part of government, and they want you all to believe that government is against gun ownership and against gun possession and these made up terms of gun violence and things like that. And that is not the case. It isn't even close to the case, but they don't want you to know that. And you mentioned earlier in the intro that YouTube will not show firearms videos. And there's a reason for that. It's not because they're violent. It's because they don't want the rest of the population that doesn't own guns to know the truth about guns, that they are not bad, that it's not what the government is telling you. And from a cop world, I've been doing this for 31 years. And particularly that you have more contact with the public as a patrol deputy, as an investigator, as a supervisor, those types of things when you're in the patrol environment, more so than what I would have now. Other than when I'm walking around, especially my county, I assume that every single person around me has a gun. And to be honest with you, I've done everything I could as the sheriff to make sure everyone around me has a gun. And as a patrol deputy, though, I would routinely come in contact with people with guns, whether it was in their homes, whether it was in their cars. Rarely did I ever come across anyone in public that had a gun without a permit or that told you I have a concealed weapons permit. But in cars, it was very common. And I wasn't afraid of that. I mean, as a cop, we assume that every vehicle we pull over, that the people are armed. We truly do. So if you get pulled over, whether you have a gun in there or not, you may think that we are being cautious or that we are being forceful or telling you to put your hands on the steering wheel. It's because we are assuming there is a gun in the car. And the reason why we're doing that, it's not because of the gun. It's because of the person. We now have to make sure we're not afraid of the gun. We're afraid of the person. And so as soon as we identify you and who you are, the gun's secondary now. And many, many times someone would say, I have a gun in the car. It's like, perfect. Now I don't have to wonder. So tell me where it is. It's over here. It's in the glove box. It's under my seat, wherever the case may be. And then it's like, okay, do not reach there. Everything's all good now until I see your hand go there. Then I'm going to have to be alarmed. And then the relationship just goes on from there. Then the traffic stop is either for the traffic violation or whatever it is. And for cops, very rarely would we do anything with a gun that we find in a car, unless you have warrants, unless you're on probation, unless you're prevented from having that gun. And I can't speak for everyone, but I will speak for the overall majority that's not an issue for us, because we know that you are not the problem. If you're telling me you have a gun and you're telling me it's for your protection, I don't have anything to worry about from you.
Yeah, I've always found it kind of interesting, just seeing how many members of law enforcement take part in the advocacy for the Second Amendment. Mm-hmm. You're talking about the physical application in that story, but the advocacy as well, which is where I spend the majority of my time. There's a lot of law enforcement representation, and hey, guess what? The firearms community really props up and supports law enforcement. I just find it really weird. What is your perspective on that? Maybe seeing the media from the advocacy perspective, kind of look down on firearms and demonize them, while you have an entire population of law enforcement that's pushing up against that in the grassroots efforts.
So we have to realize, I don't like talking in conspiracy theory, terms or anything like that, but we have to get to a point where we're just being honest with each other and being honest with everyone, and everyone has to be honest. I can tell you that your government is not honest. It isn't even, they aren't even close. They're extremely dishonest. And the media is extremely dishonest and extremely misleading because they are pushing the government agenda of demonizing weapons, demonizing guns. And it's wrong. And the experts in crime, the experts in violence, the experts in anything gun related are typically law enforcement. And they don't want the general public to know what law enforcement feels about gun ownership and about gun possession. Because in the end, the reason why you were saying that cops are in the gun community, I mean, we obviously, I mean, a gun is our livelihood. We're wearing guns every day, and we depend on that in certain situations to protect our lives or somebody else's. And so the respect that we have for the gun is for the tool. No one is afraid. I'm not afraid of this gun on my hip. Not one single bit. It's never going to go off and hurt me or you. And so we know that the gun community at large are good law-abiding people. That's why they like law enforcement. Law-abiding residents like their law enforcement. And in turn, law enforcement likes law-abiding residents. I mean, it's the criminals that we go after. We're not going after the law-abiding people. And they're trying. The government wants everyone to believe that these guns are demonized, that law enforcement is afraid of guns, and then they'll even go further and they'll get a politically motivated police chief, not a sheriff. They'll get a politically motivated police chief that's afraid of his job, and he'll come out in support of gun legislation or something that's going to take away your rights. And then it sends that mixed message, and then that's what the media is going to push on everyone.
Right.
Is that and they'll use broad terms of law enforcement when really it's one. Yeah. And it's a battle that we're really involved with of getting the truth out.
Does that positive relationship amplify at all when you break down the community even further to the CCW community? I know that you've been a huge proponent of CCWs from the moment you started running for sheriff. I'm curious, first of all, if you feel like you have accomplished what you wanted to accomplish from within the department when it comes to CCWs, and is there, like, I guess the question that I want to ask is, what's the level of trust there when you see somebody who's gone through everything that needs to be gone through to get a CCW from a law enforcement perspective?
So just by the nature of what it is, I mean, I would be being dishonest if I told you that there's no difference. There is a difference. The people that have come forward that said, I want to carry a gun and I want to have a permit to carry a gun, and they go through not only an interview with us, but they're giving us all of their personal information. They're trusting us with that. They're going through an interview about things that they may have done wrong in their past or bad in their past, which truly doesn't matter for the present. And they're honest about it. They're honest about what they did or what they didn't do. They're honest about why they want to carry that gun. They're honest in that they don't have a criminal background, or they've never done that. They've never hurt anybody else in those types of circumstances. And so everyone that has that CCW, we know that they've already done that, and we know they are at a certain level. For someone that doesn't have a CCW, that may be out in, I pull over a vehicle, they don't have a CCW, but they're carrying a gun. It doesn't mean that I trust them any less, but the person that says, I have a CCW and my gun's wherever it is, it's like, okay, I already know that person's law abiding. I already know that person has a huge respect for that, for the permit, for the process. They're not going to hurt me. That other person that says I have a gun in the car, just because they don't have a CCW doesn't mean they're any less, but I don't know about their background. I mean, they may be, I really don't know. And I don't want to get into, say the wrong thing, but I don't know if they're violent. I don't know why they're carrying that gun. I don't know. I really don't know the reasons, but they're telling me, so they're at least a little honest with me, and we're getting that friendship thing going on where he's not going to hurt me if he's telling me he has a gun. But there is a different level of calmness for me if I know that person already has a CCW.
Yeah, and I mean, we've been talking about it on the channel. It's kind of a shame. Well, I mean, it's not really a surprise the way that the California legislature has operated with the supermajority that they have, but it is definitely a shame to bring things up like Senate Bill 2 attacking CCW holders when the crime rates seem to be the lowest of any community.
Well, that was a brutal bill. Even the years before that, when they were trying to get it passed, when they didn't, and arguing truth with an attorney general who is dishonest and agenda driven to take away your gun rights. That position right there. He is the biggest fraud in this state right now, because he is an embarrassment to law and order. He is an embarrassment to law enforcement. And by statute, he's the top law enforcement official in the state. And he truly is an embarrassment to all of us, because he is anti your rights. He is huge government control. He is the person leading this charge to criminalize law-abiding residents and take away their rights to carry guns. And he was huge in convincing those legislators to vote for SB 2. And it's a travesty for our constitutional rights here in California that you have a law enforcement official, the top one, that's pushing for that. Obviously, the governor is the same way. And you have to look at it as what it is. We have to be honest that we are in a state that is moving far towards socialism. The only way that can happen is if you have a disarmed populace. And those were our founding fathers' words. Those are not my words. And it's the truth. And so to criminalize law-abiding residents makes absolutely no sense when law enforcement knows that the criminals we are out there chasing and trying to keep in jail and trying to keep away from the rest of us, they are doing everything they can to keep them out of jail. But yet they want the law-abiding people in jail.
Right. Yeah, and I guess speaking of the governor and some of those broader strokes that you're painting there, even though we're looking down the barrel of the 2024 general elections here, we still got a larger conversation happening on the governor election that's going to be happening in 2026. Your name has been among that. I'm just sort of curious what your thoughts are as far as the deficiencies of our state government is concerned. What are the primary things that we should be looking at as far as those deficiencies that might need to be changed?
Well, the biggest one is we have a political agenda to get rid of the Second Amendment, and that's in the country. And really, without those exact words, that's the agenda in California. And the agenda in California always drives the rest of the country. It always has. That saying, I don't know exactly, but so goes California. How goes California, so goes the rest of the country. And they know that this social experiment that they're doing, if they get it passed here, and it doesn't matter what it is, then it moves to other states, whether it's guns, whether anti-gun, whether it's pro-marijuana, everything, pro-drugs, legalize all drugs in California, and then other states start doing it also. And so it's that entire agenda of government control. Government just wants more control of our lives, more regulation, more control of your businesses, more control of your private activity, and all of that has to be, in order to achieve that, they have to get rid of that Second Amendment. And so we have to realize that that's exactly what this is. If you value your ability to protect yourself, to protect your family, to own a gun, and I don't care if it's for protection or if it's for hunting or if it's for practice or if you just like collecting guns for whatever the case may be. If you have any notion or interest in firearms, if you are not yelling that from the top of the mountains for everyone to hear, you are not only doing a disservice to yourself, you're doing a disservice truly to our founding fathers and our entire military that have died protecting our Constitution. We're in a bad spot, and sometimes, I mean, this might not be this is the audience that has to hear it. I mean, they might look at me and it's like, what the hell did he just say? But I truly, for where we are, I blame firearm owners. The lawful firearm owners are lawful. We're not doing anything wrong. Why are we not yelling that to everybody? Why are we not voting in people that value our constitutional rights, our Second Amendment rights? The biggest thing is if you believe in the Constitution, you believe in the Second Amendment, you believe in gun ownership, and you own firearms, if you are not voting and trying to convince everyone else to vote, you are the reason that we are in this spot. And I'll go a little bit further and say that the reason California is blue, the reason why there is an SB2, the reason why we have government officials that despise our Second Amendment rights is exactly because of this community, because they don't vote. 80% of gun owners in California do not vote. The governor election last time when Newsom won, he won by 1.5 million votes. There's more than 4 million, 5 million gun owners in California that refuse to vote. It could be a blowout. We could change. We are a red state if gun owners, and then you can throw in Christians and everything else later. That's a bigger number. But just the gun owners. If gun owners in California would all decide to vote next Tuesday, in 2 Tuesdays, not only would California be red, we would guarantee that Trump is our president. We would change the legislature from a supermajority blue, it would go supermajority red in one day.
Yeah.
And it is gun owners' fault that we are in this position because they are so wrongly paranoid. They have been convinced by the anti-gunners that you need to hide, that you need to be afraid. And the reality is, if we would all just stand up, we are the majority. And we can control our government. We can be just like good states, Texas, Utah, Wyoming, those states that value gun owners and gun ownership. And we are the biggest state in the country, and we could do it. It's people are just not doing their responsibility.
Challenge proposed. I guess
it is.
If you want the responsibility for something, I guess you want it to be on yourself. But we've kind of touched on this too, and looking at the firearms community and trying to break it down, there are segments within segments, right? The advocacy community, I have found, does get out to vote, but there is that huge disparity of what we call bedside gun owners, right? They want the security of having a firearm, but don't necessarily have it as a priority when they go to vote, or they simply just don't go and vote. And that has been a huge challenge to try and bring the education to those people to either get them to have the Second Amendment as a priority, or to just get the necessity to vote to their ears that'll actually drive them out. And I definitely agree with the sentiment here. We do have a huge voting block if you count the gun owners in the state, and once that does get put to use, you're right. There's not a whole lot stopping it. But
yeah.
I mean, speaking about this election coming up, there are some proposed propositions on that ballot that we're going to be looking at. Before these were even proposed, though, there is something that you've been outspoken about for years at this point, and that is a crime problem. Now, we do have, I always forget the number, so forgive me, but it's Proposition 36, right?
There's Prop 36 on the ballot.
We do have Prop 36 on the ballot. I mean, how exactly would you describe on a timeline us getting from a point where it wasn't a high priority as a ballot initiative to where now we need Proposition 36?
Yeah. So this really started in 2012. Really before that, with a bunch of things in government moving up to it. But then 2012 was AB 109, which was prison realignment. 2014 was Prop 47. Prop 47 was where we were basically lied to by, ironically, Kamala Harris as the Attorney General, and we were fooled into voting for Prop 47 by calling it the Safe Schools and the Safe Streets Initiative, and that decriminalized theft. It decriminalized all of drugs. There were so many, and then Prop 57, which released a whole bunch of criminals back into our neighborhoods. So the demise of crime in California started with Prop 47. We knew that in law enforcement. We knew what the consequences were going to be, but because it's an agenda, because it was on purpose, the government didn't care. The governor at the time, the attorney general obviously lied. It was on purpose that they were going to destroy public safety. They were going to make law enforcement the villain. Routinely, we have heard it blamed on law enforcement that crime is so high because law enforcement won't do anything. Well, our lawmakers in Sacramento have tied our hands. We can't do anything. And so timeline-wise, we fought this all along for a legislative fix. The problem is they were smart when they did it, and they knew that if they just passed a law, that as soon as they lost their majority, that law could be changed. A law that is passed by the voters cannot be changed. It has to be changed by the voters. So no matter what dishonest politicians tell you in Sacramento about them wanting to make stronger theft laws, they want to fix what's going on right now, outside of Prop 36, it's impossible because you cannot change any aspect of Prop 47 without going back to the voters to let them change it. And that's what Prop 36 is. One of the little issues that we had was in 2020, we tried to get another ballot measure on board that would repeal the entire Prop 47. And again, we were completely lied to by our Attorney General. It was Bonta at the time. When you read your ballot magazine, it lied to you and told you, it convinced you that you wanted to vote no. And I knew that was going to it was going to fail because my wife was voting by mail at the time. She was reading the ballot box and she's checking off for her sample ballot. And I heard her reading it. I wasn't really paying attention. I knew what she was talking about. And then at the end, I just heard her say, "Well, that's a no."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "That's a yes." And so we failed again. So then it brings us to this new Prop 36, where the district attorneys wrote Prop 36. It was a coalition of district attorneys with law enforcement involved instead of law enforcement at the helm. And they did very well. It's very well written. It is not a repeal of 47, which I would really like, but it is a more calm, if you will, way of moving toward fixing all of those issues. Maybe if you're a social person, a social Democrat or a social Republican even, there are maybe some things of Prop 47 that you like. I think we should just start over and fix it later. But this is appealing to both sides of the aisle. One of the biggest supporters for Prop 36 is the mayor of San Francisco, and she is a hardcore Democrat, far left. But she knows that Prop 47 destroyed her city.
Right.
And so Prop 36 absolutely must pass. The government is actually realizing that we've got nearly a 70% polling in favor of right now, so they know it's going to pass. Not to say that we can't keep concentrating and pushing and we have to force this yes on 36 because you never know what can happen in the end. But this will take a little bite out of Prop 47. We'll be able to address drug abuse. We'll be able to address chronic drug abuse, chronic theft, regular retail theft, and even mental illness, to where we can force people into rehab, into drug rehab and mental health rehab. So it's going to do a lot. It's not the panacea fix-all. It's just a little bite at the apple that then we can start doing bigger things later.
Gotcha. So overall, regardless of whatever taglines they might put on the ballot itself, as far as crime is concerned, that's a yes on 36. And obviously, all of that application goes to law enforcement, right? You're the one that enforces the law. I'm kind of curious, and again, leading up to this, to the point where even a Democrat mayor in San Francisco. I mean, can you shed some light on how bad it actually is as a law enforcement officer under the current Prop 47? Yeah.
So you can go back to the passage, 2014, and if you truly put a bar graph or a line graph and show the increase in crime with the dates of when Prop 47 passed, that's what it is. It's as we go along in dates, crime is just going up and up and up. And some of the fallacy of Prop 47 and what the governor touts, what the attorney general touts, is they say that crime is going down. We all know crime is not going down. Crime is skyrocketing across the board. The problem with it is back in Prop 47 and Prop 57, they made a whole bunch of crimes no longer crimes. So if they're no longer crimes today, but they were in 2014, you can see that crime has to go down because it's not a crime anymore. But yet we still have the overall numbers that are the same or a little bit higher. So in reality, they're astronomically higher because all of those things that used to be crimes, if we were still reporting them, we would just keep adding to those numbers. And so that's the biggest thing. Theft was the major thing. So stealing from your yard, if they steal your lawnmower, they steal your kids' bikes, they steal something from your yard or your truck or your business, under $1,000, there's no consequence. There's absolutely no consequence. And then they can go from your house, still less than $900. It's $950. I said $1,000, but it's $950. You still less than $950. Go to your neighbor's house, do the same thing. The neighbor's house, do the same thing. They can get $50,000 worth of property in your neighborhood in one night. Nothing was going to happen to them.
And I mean, I guess if you're out there, you can see the evidence, right? Like, CVS doesn't install 100% of those glass cases around their products for no reason. So, right?
I was in Sacramento, and someone they falsely they just think they can be loud and say that how I'm lying because the data shows. And I'm like, okay, your data's great because we can make data whatever it is. But if crime is going down, you tell me why all of the buildings around our state capitol in Sacramento are boarded up. You tell me why all of the businesses have left San Francisco and all of the businesses are boarded up. Tell me why Los Angeles is boarded up. Tell me why businesses are fleeing this state if crime isn't going down. Tell me why Walgreens has plexiglass on all of their shelves. Tell me why Walmart, all of these different businesses. We know crime is going up. And so it's just something, it's where we've got to start being loud. We've got to start being vocal. And I think that's kind of a little bit of my appeal for the last several years is I am standing up to them. And it's getting play. And then so people are starting to stand up.
Well, and I guess the reason why I bring it up is because you can also draw a correlation there to the CCW or the firearms community at large, but the CCW community also. We saw a huge influx of firearms purchases during the lockdowns in 2020. And I think similarly, as you see it becoming more and more apparent that crime is growing out there, you want more and more people who want to be able to protect themselves in public, which immediately gets nullified again by something like a Senate Bill 2. So you've really got some conflicting things there, but overall, I think that we have an influx of people who want to get their CCWs. And I guess as we close this out, we've talked a little bit about the legislature as well as, the law enforcement and your perspective of the firearms community. Moving forward here, we've got these 2024 elections. We'll have a 2026 governor election. What would your message be to the firearms community at large?
The bottom line, truly, we have to vote. And this whole thing about our community not voting is new to me. I would have never imagined that in my life that gun owners don't vote and refuse to vote because somehow they've been conned or they have this belief that the government's coming after their guns. They're coming after their guns because they've convinced you to not vote, and so you're putting them in that this is all going to happen. You're facilitating this. And so as I'm doing what I'm doing in Sacramento and fighting these politicians and fighting this movement of big government and less our rights, it's imperative that I have the people behind me. And knowing that we have a populace that can completely change the political landscape of California and they refuse to do it is very disheartening to me. Because I feel like, I've brought death threats on my family. I've brought my kids, my grandkids, and because I'm standing up to this. And all of the people, and even the gun community, the activists, the CPRAs, the NRA, and there are many other local gun rights activists that are fighting on the front lines. And the people behind the scenes, by just saying, well, I'm going to let them do it so I don't have to, or I don't want to get involved, or that's their job. I'll give them $10 and that's my contribution. We can't think like that. You know, the greatest thing that was ever given to us by our forefathers is the ability to vote and pick who we want in government. And if you are not picking that, it's your fault that we're losing what we have, because we all believe the same thing. We all want a lawful society. We all want to be able to protect ourselves and be able to walk to the park and not be worried about, you know, your wife losing her purse or her jewelry. Right. And we just need to start getting more involved, not just in the CPRAs. It's the regular people. It's the people that are going to these gun stores and being afraid for their safety, so they're going to buy a gun. Well, you need to start sticking up for yourself and sticking up for the rest of us, because we can change this landscape, and we can do it in one election.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and that's exactly what we're trying to do here. We're trying to bring that education to as many people as possible to make it a priority. But I know that you're a busy guy. I want to thank you very much for coming on and sharing with us today.
Absolutely. You know, I appreciate you doing what you're doing, and even this event for this weekend. And I just want to end with this. For the people that are out there watching, hopefully you share this, you get other people to watch it. I guarantee you there's anti-gun people out there that are watching this just to see what we're saying. And my challenge to them is to come to one of these. Come see what this is. Come talk with the people that are here. Come see what we're doing and what this community does and the type of people we are. And you're going to be forced to change your opinion, because it is not what the government, your opinion, if it's negative, is based on a false narrative by our government and the media. And what goes on here is completely different.
Yeah, I think it is surprising for people who haven't been to an event like this or a gun show in general. You kind of come and realize it's a family environment. Mm-hmm. There's lots of smiling faces. There are, you know, the safety is the primary focus within the firearms community, and I think that is also a message that we really need to get out there. But again, Sheriff, I do appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on with us.
You're welcome. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. And guys, we're going to have more to come. We definitely appreciate Sheriff Bianco coming on with us. We are, like we've been talking about here at Route 66 Range Expo. It's going to be going on up until, I think, 3 o'clock today. So again, if you haven't been able to check it out and you're in the area, please come on down and see what it's about. Get some FaceTime with those vendors. Get some FaceTime with the firearms owning community. We're going to go ahead and play that quick promo, and we'll be right back.
We are in troubled times.
We're not stopping here.
Landmark gun laws.
Public.
It's getting worse.
Where sometimes it is hard to define what is right and wrong.
I look forward to signing each and every one of those common sense gun bills.
I'm prepared to go back to muskets.
Do you have no common decency?
During these times, we search for what is steadfast, what is lasting, and what we know. The Second Amendment is lasting. The Founding Fathers said, The right of self-defense never ceases. It is among the most sacred and alike necessary to nations and individuals. CRPA follows those same values and has been doing so for over 147 years. There are many fly-by-night groups that promise success and say they stand for foundational values, but look deeper and you find they are not as steadfast as one would think. In a world where it's necessary to protect yourself and your loved ones, CRPA stands with you in that. We will not concede, and we will hold the line to defend the second. Now, like really no other time that we have experienced in our lifetimes, it is important to defend those values and not allow others to water down our voice. Now is the time to join CRPA and be part.
All right, everybody, we are back again. Thank you to Sheriff Bianco. But now sitting next to me, we have one of the attorneys at Michelle & Associates. He's been on the channel several times, and we're fortunate enough to have him here with us today. That is Kostas Moros. Kostas, thanks for coming on.
No problem. It's always a pleasure. Kevin dragged me out of bed today to make sure I showed up at Route 66. I was going to sleep in, but, we got to talk about our cases. And then he made me follow Sheriff Bianco, which is just not fair. We all hope that Sheriff Bianco chooses to run for governor. I think he would make a great governor, and I'm pressuring him to do so. but we'll have to let him decide that for himself.
Yeah, somebody had to call you at 7 a.m. today. So I'm glad that I got to be the one to do that, but it certainly is a pleasure to have you here in person with us again. I guess we can start off, yesterday I kind of ended the stream just kind of offering a preview of why events like this one here at Route 66 are so important, because we've got so much litigation going through the courts. We've had a couple of really big things happen over the last couple of years. Obviously, the Bruen decision earlier this year. We saw the Chevron doctrine basically be gone away with. So many lawsuits here in California, but some of them have national implications. I'm curious, as a Second Amendment attorney, what is your overall assessment of Second Amendment litigation, not just in the state, or not just in the state, but also federally? I tend to feel like it's optimistic. Do you kind of feel the same way?
I do, with some qualifications. So we are definitely better off than we were after Heller, because after Heller, there was this great big hope that, we would start winning all these cases, and what courts did was, no. There was a few wins, not really in the Ninth Circuit, but in other circuits like Ezel, and clearly total gun bans were gone after Heller. But then the circuits just kind of started handing the government wins and ignored the historical test Heller established in favor of this interest balancing approach. After Bruen, we've seen some of that still. Now they try and cheat the history in other ways by talking about the plain text and such, but we've definitely had many more wins than we ever had pre-Heller. What I tell people to keep perspective is, when we get the latest disappointing ruling, is people in California, in LA, in San Francisco, are getting carry permits now. They can carry in most public places now. That was insane a decade ago to even think. The only people who could carry there were people who lived in the rural counties like Riverside, who might have gotten a permit. But now we've seen that change. You can go to a gun store today, and although we hate those magazine disconnectors and chamber load indicators, you can buy some modern handguns in California. That's different. We are seeing progress, and now I think the real test is coming with this cert decision in Snope. I think if the Supreme Court grants cert in Snope, which is an assault weapons case out of
I was going to say, can you walk us through? We haven't covered Snope on the channel yet, I don't think. Can you give us kind of the plain English on what that lawsuit is?
Sure. So Snope used to be called, I think it was Bianchi versus Frosch. It's had a number of names. All these cases shift names as people retire or leave office or plaintiffs leave. But it was Bianchi, and Bianchi is a challenge to Maryland's assault weapon ban. So that's similar to California, Maryland's ban on common rifles and various features and all of that. And Bianchi, like our case, Duncan, went up to the Supreme Court and then was GVR'd after Bruen. So the Supreme Court said, do it again in light of Bruen. The Fourth Circuit took forever, but they finally got it done. They did another en banc ruling. And unlike the Ninth Circuit in Duncan, they actually got it done pretty quick. We got a ruling in August, so it was a bad ruling, but to their credit, at least it was a bad ruling that came out quickly. so now the plaintiffs in what's now called Snope are seeking certiorari, which is review with the Supreme Court. And there's reasons for optimism because just recently Maryland asked for an extension, a long extension, even though they had already gotten one to respond. And the Supreme Court granted it, but on a shortened timeline. And that indicates, hopefully, that they're going to grant review. And if they don't, it's going to be very disappointing because it would frankly be moral cowardice on the part of the Supreme Court if they dodge this after, if they deny cert, the case is over. This is a final judgment. And this is a case they sent back down after Bruin. So they would have wasted the plaintiff's time and resources for another couple of years just to deny review when when the Fourth Circuit reached, in effect, the same ruling, just, with a Bruin costume on it instead of a post-Heller interest balancing costume on it. So I'm hopeful that the Supreme Court will grant review, will say that whatever else states may do, they can't ban common rifles like AR-15s. And I'm sure, this being the Supreme Court, there'll be some annoying footnote where they say, of course you can do background checks, maybe you can register them, blah, blah, blah. But if we can get that baseline, that will really move the ball forward for us. If we don't, it's going to be very disappointing. I'm not saying we're giving up. We are never giving up. But it's going to definitely be disappointing if the Supreme Court doesn't grant cert in Snope. Yeah.
So, I mean, for that lawsuit specifically, you're saying that if they don't grant cert, it goes to final judgment, and that is what it is. But overall, you're saying that there is room for optimism
Absolutely.
as far as Second Amendment litigation is concerned. Let's talk about a couple of those lawsuits that CRPA has that have been around for a little while. You've got the Duncan case and you've got the Rohde case. Actually, the Rohde case, we have oral arguments at the Ninth Circuit, right? I think coming up here in December.
Yes, coming up very soon. I forget the exact date, but it's soon. Yeah.
I mean, do these lawsuits have national implications?
Absolutely. I mean, Duncan is next in line after Snope because Snope doesn't involve magazines. So even if we win on Snope, we get a good ruling, in theory, you could have a situation where, yes, you can have, standard AR-15s, but you're limited to 10-round magazines. So Duncan's an important case, too. And we'll have to see how that goes. Because the Ninth Circuit, given it's the same panel from 2020, I love to be hopeful, but this panel's almost certainly going to rule the same way they did in 2020, just again with the Bruin costume.
Actually, I don't know if that's something that we have covered. So I know that in the oral arguments for Duncan, there was a lot of arguing going on between the judges, something that we had never seen before. So we made sure to highlight some of that discussion in a video, but that discussion sort of revolved around whether or not they were going to go with the same panel. So you're saying they have gone with the same panel?
Yeah, well, they'd have because the en banc panel from 2020 took it as a comeback case. I vaguely recall one justice retired. I'm not. That might be from another case. I'm trying to remember right now. But it's basically the same 7-4 panel as 4 years ago with the last Duncan en banc. And that did cause a stir, especially because they skipped the 3-judge panel step. That caused a lot of consternation because it's unprecedented. Yes, there is this process by which the Ninth Circuit takes cases as so-called comeback cases where the same 3-judge panel, if they heard it before, like on preliminary injunction, they take it again. But it's never been done with an en banc before. And we looked at the rules and we suppose there's no reason it can't be, and ultimately they make the rules. They're the Ninth Circuit. But clearly some judges were not on board with that. Looking in hindsight, I'm kind of glad they did it because it sped up our timeline. If we had to go through a 3-judge panel, if we lost, we would have had to appeal to the Supreme Court. But if we won, let's say we got lucky on the draw, we would just get en banced anyways, and it would probably be this panel. So they saved us a year, although it looks like now they're trying to take that back by taking forever to really, we had oral argument in March or April, and we're now in almost November, and there's still no ruling, even though the Fourth Circuit heard argument around the same time and got its ruling out in August. So we'll see how it goes. But and then now there's also this game being played by there's another case en banc, the butterfly knife case called Teeter, and that one has a very slight 6-5, I think, conservative majority. And only en banc panels can overturn other en banc panels. So there could be this game of chicken being played right now where Teeter's holding theirs to see what Duncan says so they can overturn Duncan. But I imagine if that happens, we'll get, not to get too in the weeds, but we'll get our first ever super en banc. That's never happened in history, but that's when all 29 Ninth Circuit judges sit for a case. That would be fun too, as much as delay is annoying.
Well, I'm curious also if has there been any analysis? I feel like it's pretty easy, the way that these judges rule on cases, to almost view it politically, right? There's like a line, there's a certain amount of judges on this side, there's a certain amount of judges on this side. We commonly talk about whether or not a judge was appointed by a Democrat or appointed by a Republican. What have you seen any influential change from Bruen on decisions like from specific judges? I don't know if that's something that you necessarily keep track of, but I'm kind of curious. We have this decision in Bruen that's supposed to reshape the way that a judge would look at something like this. Have we seen that change actually happen?
There's been some. So generally, look, all things being equal, there's exceptions on both sides, but all things being equal, when I look at a judge assignment and it's someone without any Second Amendment history, you can usually get a good idea of how they're going to rule by who appointed them. Biden judge bad, Trump judge good, go back, in time, Bush, Obama, etc. But there has been some shift. I'll give it that. So, for example, in Hawaii, you had an Obama-appointed judge rule in the Wolford matter and give them a big win on sensitive places. In the recent, I think it's an FPC case, Nguyen v. Bonta, which is the 1 in 30 rule, one gun per 30 days. It was, I think, a majority panel, a majority anti-gun panel, you would presume, by political appointments, but they actually lifted the stay on the district court injunction right after oral argument, which signals that they're going to affirm the district court that the 1 in 30 law is unconstitutional, and that's a majority Democrat panel. So I think there, and then there's other examples, like up in the 8th Circuit, there was a federal judge that, although she complained about Bruen, she did ultimately rule that the 18 to 20 age limit rules are unconstitutional, where you can't carry till you're 21. So there is some shift, but I think where you're not going to see a shift is on the hottest button issues. For example, assault weapons bans. I can't think of a judge. There might have been one in Colorado right after Bruen on TRO, but other than that, there hasn't been a Democrat-appointed judge that I know of that struck down an assault weapons ban, even under Bruen. So there's some things they're gonna hold the line on, and we just need the Supreme Court. But on the other stuff, there's been some thawing. I mean, look at our. Maybe you're gonna ask about it, but look at May v. Bonta. We got a terrible panel in that one. I mean, if Attorney General Bonta could have handpicked the panel on the Ninth Circuit that was going to hear May v. Bonta, it would have been this panel or pretty close to it. Two long-time anti-gun one judge appointed by President Carter, believe it or not, and then another appointed, I forget, Judge Graber who appointed her, but I think it was Clinton. And then you had one recent Biden appointee. So a very favorable panel. And yet we got not a good ruling, but a much better than expected ruling. We won on stuff like public transportation, banks, hospitals, and even our version of the vampire rule, although as we've discussed, we have some complaints about what they did with Hawaii's version. But still, the fact that you have these sorts of judges striking down any sensitive places restrictions is not what I expected. When we got that panel, I thought we were going to lose everything or close to everything. So it was, we're not happy with it. We're still going to fight the case. But the fact that, we're getting these better than expected rulings is a sign that there's been some thawing. Not enough, but some. Sorry.
I think that's
long-winded as always.
I think that's an important perspective to have, though. It's almost like your kids growing up or a tree growing. When you're watching it every second of the day, it doesn't really seem like it's growing. But over time, you can see evidence, and I think that as we hone in individually on lawsuits, I think it's a good perspective to have that there are decisions that were being made pre-Bruen that have shifted post-Bruen with some of these judges, and I think that ends up feeding into the optimism, right? Especially with the Supreme Court that we have now. I think that there's definitely a lot to be optimistic about if we can get some of this stuff up to the Supreme Court. But other than that, I mean, talking about the Ninth Circuit and the California federal district courts, you kind of started dabbling into May v. Bonta. Would you consider that We talked about it with Sheriff Bianco just a little bit ago. We talked about it with Reno May yesterday, who's the main plaintiff in that lawsuit. How prominent is that lawsuit as compared to other Second Amendment litigation going on right now?
Well, it depends what you value, but for me personally, I deeply care about assault weapons cases, no doubt, but the right to carry is most important to me right now. I have a almost 2-year-old daughter, a wife, and when we're out in public, I absolutely think I have the right to own my AR-15, but what's more pressing is the right to carry. So in a public place, if some psycho criminal attacks my family or me, I can defend myself. That's the most pressing thing. And sensitive places are an effort to nullify Bruin, to take away effectively that right. I used to say that if we were to lose May v. Bonta and all these laws stood up, then I don't even care about CRPA versus LASD, which is our other case, because who cares about wait times or fees if you can only carry on the sidewalk?
Right.
Nobody's going to bother with the permit anyway. So, and we'll get to CRPA versus LASD, but May v. Bonta is probably our most important case in my opinion for that reason. But, some other people might say that, having the rifle like an AR-15 with a 30-round magazine is actually more important to the original anti-tyranny purpose of the Second Amendment, and I respect that. If that's where your priorities lie, that's fine. I'm just saying in terms of practical realities, in terms of what people do to their day-to-day life, being able to exercise their peaceable right to carry in almost all public places is, I think, at the apex for me.
Well, let's talk about it because it is, I guess, almost a tangent, but pretty parallel. Let's talk about CRPA versus LASD. Can you give us a quick description of what the lawsuit is and an update on where we are in it?
Sure. So CRPA versus LASD is my biggest headache of a lawsuit because when we were going into it, we were just going to sue on wait times and maybe high fees for Laverne. And I went to Chuck and I said, well, we're CRPA, it's a nonprofit, we got to be efficient. So let's squeeze in some more issues. So we have some people who are wrongfully denied, we think, and we also have reciprocity and non-resident carry. And Chuck's like, go ahead, but this is going to be a pain in the butt. And it has been because it's so many issues. There's 3 different defendants. And so the latest on that is we filed our preliminary injunction, had to wait quite a while, got a ruling which, given the judge, was probably pretty decent. We have some complaints for sure with how she handled some of the stuff, but we're going to address that moving forward and reframe the case in a way she apparently would like to see. But the biggest news from the preliminary injunction, which I'm sure everyone's heard by now, is she ruled for us on non-resident carry that California has to issue permits to non-residents. She asked us then to take 30 days to speak with the state and come up with a proposed order to give her on how this would work. We did that. That was in mid-September, and now we're almost at the end of October, and she hasn't signed it, and I don't know what the holdup is. It's definitely frustrating, but this is something the state agreed to, and they certainly haven't complained after we filed the proposed order. So I'm hoping it's just a delay, and the judge will sign it hopefully this week, but we don't know. And given that this is a case, because part of the proposed order was a lesser part, but one gentleman, because she gave individual relief to the plaintiffs on the wait times issue, and one gentleman now has been waiting for his CCW permit for over 2 years, and he's also on the proposed order for LA to speed things up and get him his permit. So it's a little frustrating to me that that this judge, in a case that partially concerns wait times, is taking so long to get us this relief. And
how's that for irony?
It's a bummer. I know judges are busy, and I'm hopeful she'll sign it soon. But I can't help but feel that if this were any other constitutional right, if this were, my voter registration's been held up for 2 years, judges would jump on that immediately. But since it's the right to bear arms and they don't really like it, they slow walk it. And that's the other thing. Sometimes even when you win, but the judge might not be that favorable to your side, maybe there's a little bit of a lack of urgency. And I'm not, I don't mean to be overly critical of one particular judge. In fact, I think she's smart and funny. I was very impressed with her at the hearing personally. But I do wish there was a little more urgency to get us this relief that our clients need.
Well, that is a constant battle that we have in our own minds, just as far as the court is concerned. You want it to move a lot faster than it always seems to, but so long as the perseverance is there, hopefully we get it done in the end. We're definitely optimistic on that one as well. I guess I was also curious to pick your brain. We have Rody v. Bonta that's going to come up for oral arguments here on December 2nd. We got a little taste as it got pushed back down to the federal district court. That went to Judge Benitez, if I'm remembering correctly, who once again issued an injunction on the case. We got a little taste of, what was Freedom Week with the Duncan case, being able to get ammunition delivered to your door. Also not having to do the background checks for the short while. I mean, what is the impact that you see on the state if we win that lawsuit?
I mean, the impact on the state is that we just go back to how ammo was bought in 2018, 2019, before the law took effect. That's what's so silly about a lot of these. The state writes these briefs of, oh my God, the sky is falling. If they win, it's going to be, blood in the streets and this and that. I'm like, what? Like 2019? That's what we did.
Yeah.
People would have ammo shipped to their door. And a lot of people, frankly, are still doing it now by doing the FFL03 COE process. It's a little bit of a pain, but a lot more and more people are doing that just so they can go back to that ability to ship ammo to their door. And it's... Where Rhodey might have implications should we win longer term is that it might set some boundaries on background checks. Because at this point, and I know some people feel differently, background checks aren't going anywhere. The Supreme Court pretty much rubber stamped them in Bruin as to carry permits, but that logic is going to apply elsewhere. And if you think this Supreme Court is going to grant cert on a basic background check case, when I say basic, like purchasing a gun, it's not going to happen, frankly. I hope I'm wrong, but it's not going to happen. So what Rhodey might do, though, is say, enough. Okay, you can have background checks, but you can't make people lose out on the ability to buy ammo online. You can't make people have a background check that wrongfully denies 10% of people who try to buy. Thousands of people. So that was, according to the state's own declarations in Rhodey, their data, for every, I think it was something like, I don't want to mislead people, you can go look at the documents, but it was some crazy ratio, like for every 50 people wrongfully denied, they got one that was properly denied. So wow. It denies way more people wrongfully than it does correctly. And by the way, when you are denied for some technical reason, like some address mismatch or something else, it doesn't tell you why you were denied. They don't send you a letter and say, hey, don't worry, you just need to correct this and this and you're good. So a lot of people might be scared. They might be like, oh my God, I got denied a background check. I better not stay away from guns because I don't want to get in legal trouble until I figure this out. And maybe they can't figure it out because they don't have money to go through. They either don't have money to get a lawyer or they're not informed enough, as most people aren't, to figure out how to use CFARS, which is California's record system online, to see what the issue is. So that's the sort of boundaries we hope to put up. If the state wants to require a background check, okay, but it has to be a reasonable one. It can't, wrongfully deny people. It can't confuse people. And most importantly, it can't charge people money because they're charging $1 for the simplified background check. That's going up. They're proposing to raise that to $5. And if they raise it to $5, they're going to raise it again.
I was going to say, what if they raise it to $5? What's to stop them in the future from raising it to $50?
And this is after they've already imposed that 11% tax, which we're also challenging. But they've imposed this 11% tax on guns and ammo. So now they're pleading poverty and saying, oh, we can't afford this background check system. It's like, what are you talking about? You just taxed us 11%. I know they're spending that for some other dumb idea, but that's their problem. They have all this money coming in, but now they want to raise the background check. And hilariously, and I know I'm prone to rambling here, but when you raise the price of that, maybe people overlook the $1, but if it goes to $5 and let's say they raise it again, all that's going to do is incentivize people to buy their ammo once a year in giant bulk, so they only have to pay it once instead of, $5 each time. So California always talks about wanting to discourage, quote, stockpiling, but they're actually encouraging people to stockpile, with this. So it's funny how these laws don't even work to do what the government hopes to do. It's just, it's become sad how typical this is.
Well, I mean, kind of running through the litigation here. Any other lawsuits that we're carrying out there that you want to bring, shed some light on?
Oh, we have so many going. I mentioned the 11% tax. That one's mired in state court, sadly, because of the Tax Injunction Act. We couldn't go to federal court, so that one will be a while. So I people ask me about that one a lot, like, hey, are you guys going to get that one defeated soon? I don't want to pay this 11%. Should I wait? And I'm like, buy what you need, don't wait. We hope to win, but it's going to be a minute because we're stuck in state court and we very well might have to lose our way up, what's called, and hope that the Supreme Court grants review, because the California state court system, I hope to be proven wrong, is very hostile to gun rights. So that's one. We have our gun show cases, which unfortunately were denied. We tried to get an emergency injunction from the Supreme Court. They denied it. I haven't checked with my colleagues whether they intend to refile again. There's some procedural confusion there, but I do know they're going to seek cert. Supreme Court cert's always a tough one, but we're hopeful that they will look into the case. We have a bunch of cases going. Boland, and then there's this, I mentioned Boland, but there's this Duncan logjam in our cases right now where because Duncan is en banc right now, all these other cases, some of ours, some other cases, are being held pending Duncan. So Boland is the handgun roster, and we did get microstamping defeated for now. The state has some plans to try to bring it back in a few years. But so there are new guns being added, but as to the chamber load indicator and the magazine disconnect, the panel has frozen the case pending Duncan. And then there's also RUP, our assault weapons challenge. Again, frozen pending Duncan. I wouldn't be surprised if somehow, even though Rhodey's slightly different, if they do the same after oral argument, say we're going to wait for Duncan. I hope not, but that's possible. And then the other cases that aren't even ours are under the same thing. I think Miller, Fouts, which is the baton case. There's just this big log jam forming in the Ninth Circuit. People ask me, like, how come you're on Twitter more often? And Chuck yells at me, like, stop tweeting all the time. And it's because there's not as much to do lately because a lot of our cases are just frozen in place until Duncan comes out. And I hope the Supreme Court grants cert in Snope, but funnily enough, one bad thing that could come from Snope being granted cert is the Ninth Circuit might say, well, okay, we're going to hold Duncan pending Snope in next June. So the logjam just continues.
Well, yeah, there has been some movement with some of these cases going through the court. So definitely not nothing to do. I'm sure you're being facetious.
And I am being facetious because a lot of cases that are on the opposite end of the spectrum from Duncan, like May, like CRPA, those are definitely moving. But the hardware-oriented cases,
right?
Yeah, those ones have largely been frozen pending Duncan. Yeah.
Which is what brings us to something like this. And I guess if we could close it out this way from your perspective, which is the courts, where a lot of this fight is going to. You've got events like we're here at Route 66 Range Expo. The proceeds from this event go to the Second Amendment litigation. What would you say to those people who are maybe on the outside looking in saying, hey, is this something that I should get interested in and involved in?
I mean, do you want to have Second Amendment rights in California? Because we're doing our best here. We're under constant barrage. And if you've bought a magazine during Freedom Week, if you've bought a new handgun after Boland, if you can suddenly get a carry permit, even unfortunately you might have to wait a little while, but if you can suddenly get a carry permit, if you haven't been blocked from carrying in private buildings, private businesses, because of our injunction in May v. Bonta, these are all things CRPA did, with our litigation. So please donate, please join. We don't have, we're a nonprofit. We don't have a ton of money, and we're taking on Governor Newsom, and we're being basically fought with our own tax dollars. So they use our tax dollars to try and take away our rights with, endless new laws being passed that we have to fight. So every little bit helps. I know it's tough out there, especially in this inflationary era, to donate. But even if it's only a couple bucks, donate what you can, support CRPA. Or if you can't donate, become informed. Tell your friends that this is all happening. That would help too. So, thanks everyone.
Well, yeah, I do. I want to thank you for taking the time for being with us today. I know that you're a regular on the channel. It's always appreciated. Thanks for coming out.
Yeah, it's a great event, Route 66. I know we're getting it's the last day of the event, but if you're nearby and can drive down here, love to say hi. Check out the event. Lots of cool stuff going on, and support some good causes.
Absolutely. And most importantly, guys, again, the community is where this is centered around. Route 66 understands that. The guests that we're bringing on this show certainly seem to understand that. We're trying to bring as much education to you as possible so that the Second Amendment can be a priority when the ballot boxes are open, which they are open right now. So obviously want to thank you again, Kostas. Guys, this is going to close us out here. I hope this has been informative for you, and I hope that you're paying attention here because Route 66 is doing something about it. We're trying to do something about it too, and hopefully you can also. So thanks again, guys, and we'll see you on the next one.
We are in troubled times.
We're not stopping
Or
here.
landmark gun laws.
It's getting worse.
Where sometimes it is hard to define what is right and wrong.
I look forward to signing each and every one of those common sense gun bills.
I'm prepared to go back to muskets.
Do you have no common decency?
During these times, we search for what is steadfast, what is lasting, and what we know. The Second Amendment is lasting. The Founding Fathers said, "The right of self-defense never ceases. It is among the most sacred and alike necessary to nations and individuals." CRPA follows those same values and has been doing so for over 147 years. There are many fly-by-night groups that promise success and say they stand for foundational values, but look deeper and you find they are not as steadfast as one would think. In a world where it's necessary to protect yourself and your loved ones, CRPA stands with you in that. We will not concede, and we will hold the line to defend the second. Now, like really no other time that we have experienced in our lifetimes, it is important to defend those values and not allow others to water down our voice. Now is the time to join CRPA and be part of something real.